Hey everyone, welcome to Learn to Write Sci-Fi. My whole goal here with these videos is to help you become a self-published sci-fi author. Now, hopefully you're moving through the writing and maybe you're getting kind of close to something maybe that you want to start showing to people. Yesterday we talked about editing, how to do a lot of the self-editing and some techniques that I have used that helps me. And then, gets you to the point where you feel confident enough in your writing, especially if you haven't done a whole lot of it before, to then share it with other people, which is what we're going to talk about today. So once you start, once you spend some time thinking, okay, who is going to probably really read this short story and then is probably going to give me real advice or real feedback? Like if you go, let's say your mom says, oh yeah, sure, I'll read it. And you give it to her and she's like, I loved every bit of it. And you know that she's not really a sci-fi person and she's your mom. So odds are she's probably just being nice and being your mom, right? Which is great. But in this situation, we need feedback. We need real feedback because we need to know if, you're on the right track, right? So what I have here, I wrote down just 5 quick questions that you could ask your readers to be able to hopefully pull out a couple pieces of really good feedback for you. Now, you have to understand, I've asked a number of people to help me with my stuff. I have several people who I send basically everything I write to, and they give me feedback. Sometimes the feedback is awesome. Sometimes the feedback is so-so. And it's not really their fault. Sometimes it's my fault with I try different questions. I try not to use the same ones every time because these people are, reading multiple things. And I don't want them to kind of get to the formula point where they're like, okay, he's always going to ask this question. But when you're dealing with different people that are reading your stuff, I think it's good to have a set number of questions and kind of a questionnaire that you can either send somebody a document for electronically for them to like type in their answers, or something that, if you're using Facebook, for example, and you're just communicating to the person like, yeah, I just finished their story. And then you can go ahead and start copying and pasting those questions over there for them to answer and get some real one-on-one feedback. You could definitely ask these questions in person. You have 2 different sides of the coin when it comes to text, right? Texting is awesome, whether that's messaging, texting, emailing, anything written, I would count as text format, is great, but sometimes people, they're possibly more likely to be slightly more honest than what they might be in person, but at the same time, emotion is not conveyed very well in the English language when it's written. It takes a lot of extra words in order to convey feeling. And then the other is, if they're just kind of in the hurry, they're just going to answer some of these questions like, good, it was great, I enjoyed it, whatever. If you do it in person, though, I don't know if you're necessarily going to get the same level of feedback every time, because let's say you wrote, for example, you wrote a story that was okay, and they maybe really loved it, and you get really great feedback from someone, or you get somebody else and they really didn't care for it at all, and they don't want to upset your feelings because, they know you, they're face-to-face, and, so they're going to kind of pull back a little bit rather than if you are a complete stranger. If you can get complete strangers to read your stuff, I think you're more likely to get honest answers than if it's friends or family, but you probably know some people who will just be truthful and just be genuine with you. Try to find those people to read it. If your mom reads it or other people, that's great. They're supporting you. Maybe they'll give you a little nugget of feedback that really is helpful, but try to find people who are really more likely, at least, to give you the kind of feedback that you need, because you need good feedback in order to improve yourself, improve your writing, so that as you release more products, you're getting better and better and better, that people can look back at your first one and then look at your newest work and like, I can see a pattern of growth here and I can see improvement. That's some of the best feedback possibly that you could get. All right, so a couple of these questions real quick, because I won't make this video forever. The first question that I would think to ask would be, what did you think of the story overall? I'm listening for words like I liked it, I enjoyed it, it was fun, positive words that are expressing some level of entertainment, because remember, my number 1 rule when you're writing, it has to be entertaining. If it's not, even if you're writing something that's emotional or something that's has some deeper topics or something, like I want them to enjoy themselves. They don't have to have the time of their life or the best thing ever. It was just hilarious fun. I'm not after that. I'm just after they have to be entertained, because otherwise I have failed. The second question is, did you feel that the story made sense? You can reword that to however you feel, but basically you're just trying to ask them, did everything in the story, did it click together? Did it make sense? Was any of it, just blindsided you and you didn't understand what was going on? Because you're dealing with sci-fi elements here, so you could be dealing with all these ideas up in your head, but then when you go and you write them, you might leave certain things out. And so in the story, it might make sense to you because you can fill in the gaps very easily because you're creating the universe. But then somebody else reads it and like, well, there was this part about this red guy. I don't understand why he's red and what he's doing there and why he's there. And then you're like, oh, okay, I need to go back in the story and explain why he's there a little bit more. I mean, it may even just take a paragraph, and then all of a sudden that whole entire issue is smoothed over and it's great. Question 3. What was your favorite part of the story? I always think that's a good way for them. That is one, I'll tell you, it's a sneaky way to see if they actually read the story. I had one person once contact me, and they were saying, oh man, I bought your story, which I knew was fake because I was tracking the numbers and I knew I didn't have any sales that day because this was when I was first starting with everything. And the guy was like, oh man, it was great. It was an awesome story. And I was like, oh, that's really, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's really interesting because I didn't sell anything. So I know he's probably lying. So I asked a couple of questions just to see, like, well, what was your favorite part? What was your favorite character? And he responded with something like some character, some name he just created. That person was not in the story. There was no possible way for them to think that that name was in the story if they read the story. So that's a big indication for me, obviously, that they're lying to me. And, that, again, goes kind of back to people not wanting to hurt your feelings or anything. But I need to know, as the author, where did I mess up? Where do I need to improve? What wasn't strong? What didn't work? That's the only way for me to make my work better, is to know. I had somebody recently contact me, and they gave me a ton of constructive criticism. Blew truck-sized holes in my first story, because that was the first one that they bought. And I was like, man, I dropped the ball there. But you know what? It was my first one, and that's okay because I can take that advice. I can choose to go back and improve that one or just keep going, but I'm not going to let it stop me because otherwise then I've given up. But I need that kind of feedback in order to know, yeah, you're right, I do need to work on this better, or I need to improve here, or I need to do this or that. All right? 4, what did you think of the main character? Obviously, being a short story, whether it's 40 to 100 pages, the story pretty much predominantly, circles around just one person. So if that one character didn't come across well, then maybe you need to work on the story. I've dealt with some characters that I've created for the short stories, and some of them are, in my mind, very heroic, or some of them are very determined, very strong characters. Then I've dealt with a couple characters that were very weak-minded. And I knew that in my mind, and some of them did very bad things, like really bad things in the stories. And it was interesting to me to ask the reader, what did you think of this character? And sometimes I didn't get the feedback that I thought I would, which was really surprising to me. Even on some of the people that I thought were stronger characters, people didn't really care for them, or they saw them in the wrong light. Yet the characters that were weak, sometimes they saw them as being like good characters, and that just like blew my mind that, people experience the process of telling a story or hearing a story, receiving it and reading it in such a different way from each other that sometimes I don't know what it is yet. I know there's somebody who knows a lot about psychology, probably can talk circles around me here, but it is amazing to me to have several people read the same story, and they're not even people that I would say are vastly different on the political spectrum or on the spiritual spectrum or on the economic spectrum. They're pretty similar type of people, and it's just different opinions on the same thing. It's crazy. It's really interesting to me because you analyze that. But, you know, I thought that was pretty cool. But that's something that I think is a really good question, because you need to know if the main character worked or not, especially if you're trying to make it into a series. If you're just telling one short story and you're like, okay, this is the first and last time we're probably ever going to see this person, you know, as long as the story was good overall, then I think you're fine. But if you're trying to make a series out of it, whether it's a 3 or a 10 or a 50-part series, which would be crazy, you know, and then people are like, this main character kind of blows, and you're on story 1, you know, that's not really good in order to keep readers wanting to buy the next story, because if they don't like the main character, you're kind of sunk right in the beginning, right? And then the last question would be, if there were more stories set in the same universe and you didn't know me, right, because you're probably asking people that know you, would you want to read more? So I think that is probably one of the best ending questions that you can ask anyone, especially if they're a first-time reader of the universe that you're creating. And if you ask them, look, if you didn't know me personally, or look, we weren't family, or, you know, if we weren't close friends, and you were reading this story, take it for what it is. Read that whole story and just judge it for what it is. And you're a customer, you're a buyer, you're a consumer, and you're reading this. Would you want to read more? And if they say no, at first I'd be very surprised, because, again, most people are going to say yes. But if they say no, that would be a really good opportunity to ask them, well, why? And if they say something like, well, you know, I'm not really a big sci-fi person, then don't take anything they say as being personal, because they're not your audience. But if they say, you know, I thought the story was kind of weak, or I don't know, the universe, the story setting just didn't really catch me, or the beginning was kind of slow and I probably wouldn't have finished it, or anything else that sounds like really big red flags, fix your story. You know, again, even if you're getting some of this feedback after you've published, if you're doing everything digitally and you run into a problem, you can go back and fix it. Yes, some people will have read it in its less than perfect form. That's okay. And I'm not, again, this is to not say go out there and just publish whatever kind of half-written garbage that you can think of, like some people really honestly are doing. And they're making businesses teaching people to do this. I want you to write good content, the best that you can, but make sure it's still at a point where you can actually just hit publish. So don't freak out if someone gives you bad feedback later, but at the same time, you know, if you can ask these questions ahead of time and maybe run into someone says, look, I think maybe the second half was awesome. The first half, well, it wasn't very good. It was really weak. It was really slow. That's a bad one, because if people, like we talked about earlier, if you don't catch them in that first couple of pages, really in the first page, then they might just drop the whole thing. And that really sucks, because then you've completely lost them, and maybe even lost them to future installments or future releases of your universe. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. This is, hopefully those 5 questions help. Obviously, if you can think of more, ask. I would never ask somebody like more than 7 questions, really. I mean, unless you're got someone who's really, really wanting to give feedback, you know, then ask away. But, you know, most people only really have the retention to really give you like the best answers maybe after a first couple. So, and again, most of these people are reading it for free, right? They're reading it to help you. So you can't really expect too much. So if you are able to get more people to read your stories, and then able to get more feedback because obviously more people read it, then, you know, then you can hopefully get 1 or 2 really good, strong, constructive responses from those people. Even if you ask 5 or 7 or 10 questions, you're probably still only going to get a couple really good answers, because, you know, if you ask somebody, well, you know, would you read this again? And they just say, yes. Obviously the follow-up will be, well, what about this story did you like? Or what about this universe interests you, or something like that? Because you want to dig a little bit deeper. But you need, you know, sometimes people just want to answer with like 1 or 2 word answers, and you're like, that doesn't really give me anything, because I don't really know how much you liked it, or how much you didn't like it, or what you didn't like, or what you really enjoyed, because you're not really elaborating. So try to encourage them to elaborate at least the full sentence, because at least then you have a better chance of getting some actual feedback, and not just like a yes or a no kind of thing, and then it's like, Well, that doesn't really help me. So anyway, guys, if you'd like to follow us on Facebook as we finish out this 30-day Learn to Write Sci-Fi video challenge, you can follow us on YouTube at White Light Media and Facebook, which is just Learn to Write Sci-Fi. All right, guys. See you guys all again tomorrow. Have a good night, and thanks for watching.